What's up everyone, it's your friendly neighborhood French Canadian, and today I want to show you this bow only build, Faith and Dexterity, based on the character Hawkeye from Marvel. I'll talk to you a bit more about how the build works while showing you some footage of me fighting bosses with this build exactly. Then we'll go through everything that you need, the gear, the items, and whatnot. I'll also show you how to fight with a bow, because bows have some pretty distinctive stuff while you're fighting with them. If you've never used one before in this game, there's a few things you need to know. So I made this build based on the character Hawkeye from Marvel, and whether your favorite Hawkeye is Clint or Kate, it's fine, I love them both. But this is a bow only build, and I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty rough in this game. Builds need a serious buff. But with the talismans we're going to be using, with the incantation buffs we're going to be using, we'll actually do some pretty good damage. And I honestly think this build is pretty viable. Like right now, the footage you're seeing, I'm playing on New Game Plus, so the bosses I'm fighting actually have a larger health pool. And as I was fighting the Godskin Apostle, I was like, man, this fight is gonna suck. Like, I remember it being really hard on my first and second playthrough. And I actually had no problem, and I got him on the first try. You know, it kind of helps that you can do a ton of damage ranged instead of being right in their face, so it's easier to avoid some of their attacks. And I think that's what we have to take away from this build, really, or when you're doing ranged only. Like, as long as you're not getting swarmed by enemies from all sides, it's actually pretty freaking good. So the bread and butter of this build really is using the Pulley Bow to do big damage with Mighty Shot. And then you can switch to the black bow to apply status effects. So every arrow applies status effects, whether it's frostbite, blood loss, fire, poison, whatnot, whatever arrows you want to use, there will be a status effect applied, except like magic, I think, and obviously the regular arrows. So what you want to do is use the barrage ability that the black bow has to quickly build up the status effect bar on a boss or a big enemy. You also want to use the damage buffs like Flame Grant Me Strength during the battle, which it's pretty easy to do. Golden Vow is a bit harder because the startup time and like your character kneels and there's that whole animation. But it's pretty easy to use Flame Grant Me Strength. And I really don't think you'll be struggling a lot with this build unless you're like 100% new to the game, maybe. But I really had fun and I had no issues again on New Game Plus. And the cool thing about the black bow is that instead of doing the standing shot, which it takes a while, like it takes a couple seconds, you actually can jump up in the air and shoot, and then once you land you shoot again, and you can send 2 quick shots that way. And it's really good. I think it's specific to that bow, or maybe short bows as well, but long bows like the Pulley Bow you can't do that with. And you can also, with the black bow, roll and then shoot right after. So it's really good when you're like avoiding an attack and the enemy is still in their recovery animation of that attack, and you roll out of it, then you can send a quick shot their way. With the Pulley Bow, however, you can jump and shoot quickly, but you can't do it as you land and you can't do it as you roll. But it does way more damage, and if you use the Serpent arrows, which they do more damage themselves, if you use Mighty Shot with it, you can get a ton of damage on smaller enemies or bosses alike. So this was actually a really fun build, especially if you want to challenge yourself. But if you don't want to challenge yourself, honestly just use a Mimic tier and the both of you will literally melt enemies and bosses. It's kind of crazy. And the arrows you really want to be using here are blood arrows, because they'll cause blood loss. The poison arrows, because it will continuously do damage over time, so that's awesome for bosses because the damage will stack as you keep hitting them. You can use sleep arrows if you're fighting a dual boss, so you can put one to sleep while you focus on the other, so both of them are not on you at the same time. That's really a tactic that's going to be really useful for a build like this. But really you want all, or mostly all types of arrows in your arsenal, because there's an arrow for everything, really.
A whole batch of way too dangerous trick arrows.
Like the holy or sacred arrows will be good against undead. So like once you kill them, they won't be able to come back. They'll actually just die like normal enemies. So you want a type of arrow or a specific type of arrow for very specific situations. So I would say get them all. But if you want to focus on one or two, that's also fine. I mainly use blood, poison, and fire. But something like a magic arrow will actually really be good against golems or gargoyles and enemies like that, which, you know, aren't affected really by fire or blood loss. For the weapons, we'll actually be using two bows. The Pulley Bow, which will be our big damage bow, and then we'll use the Black Bow because of its barrage ability. We are able to apply status effects from specific arrows way quicker on enemies, and it's really, really good against bosses. We'll be using the Finger Seal to cast some attack buff incantations on our character. So let me show you where to get all this stuff. Now the Finger Seal is pretty easy actually. You can just go to Round Table Hold, go see the Twin Maiden Husks, and you can buy it from them. So that's not complicated, but I'll show you where to get the Pulley Bow and the Black Bow. The Pulley Bow is in Mount Gilmere. I'll show you from the Bridge of Iniquity how to get there. And the Pulley Bow will be on this corpse. Now keep in mind you can level this up with Somber Smithing Stones, so it's a bit easier than another regular bow. For the Black Bow, you want to go to the Capitol. You want to take the Avenue balcony, and I'll show you the way from there. It's on a rooftop, it's really easy to get. And the bow will be on this corpse right here. And again, this is a special bow, so you'll need Somber Smithing Stones to level it up. And because they are special weapons, we can't change the Ashes of War, but that's fine because the two we'll be using are the ones we need anyways. So Mighty Shot is on the Pulley Bow. Basically it sends a really, really strong shot that does a ton of damage. And this bow is a bit slower when you fire it, but here's the thing with bows, you can jump and send a quick shot, which is quicker than just firing it like that. But the Black Bow has this thing where you can send one, and then send one right as you land. You can also do it while you roll. So you can send quick shots, which again, as you see, it's way, way quicker than just sending a regular shot. Now this Black Bow has the Barrage Ash of War. So when you hold it, you want to hold L2 if you're on a PlayStation, or left trigger if you're on Xbox, and then you choose which arrow you want. R1 is going to use the arrows in your arrow 1 slot, and then R2 is going to be using the arrows in the arrow 2 slot. Now all you need to do is hold L2 and you just send them out. So you can do this as long as you have FP and stamina. It doesn't use a lot of FP, but it will be using a lot of stamina. So this is really good, as you can see, like you can send a lot of them, so you can apply status effects like for bleed arrows, poison arrows, frozen arrows, all the trick arrows you can think of, we got them, and we can apply the status effect. And that's really good because we'll be using a ton of different arrows to be able to take on different bosses and different enemies, because some enemies have resistances to some things while they're weak to other things. And when you're running a bow only build, you really want to focus on playing on the enemy's weaknesses. I personally use a lot a Bloodbone arrow and Serpent arrow. Now one thing that's weird about bow and arrow is that even if you use blood arrows, you having points in arcane is not going to make you do more damage, because arrows all have a base damage and they're not changed by anything. Now your bow's level would increase your physical damage with it and the type of damage you do with the bow, but it won't increase the damage the arrows specifically do to enemies. As you can see here, a blood arrow does 25 physical damage and 100 critical. And then the Serpent arrow does 30 physical and 100 critical. But there's a lot of things we can do to make a character do way more damage, and I'll go through that when I show you the Talismans, as well as the Incantations. Now for arrows, you can either craft them or you can buy some, because there's some merchants that sell a specific type of arrow and they have an infinite amount of them, which is really good, like the Serpent arrows, which are extremely good. You can buy from a merchant, I'll show you where. And then there's other types, like I believe the Firebone arrows as well, you can buy from merchants. But for the most part, you want to craft them. But first, if you want Serpent arrows, the vendor is in Caelid. He's right here in the isolated merchants shack. You can see right here he sells them, and you can buy like 100, 200, 300 a pop. It's definitely not going to be wasted. If you want unlimited fire arrows, because that's what you mainly want to use, the vendor is also in Caelid. And it's the vendor right here, the nomadic merchant. And once you spawn in, you can see his fire right there, his fire pit. And he will sell you unlimited fire arrows. Now when you're crafting arrows, so you'll need, like I said, one of two things. Thin beast bones, and then some other type of farming material. So for magic arrows, you need thin beast bones and glintstone fireflies. For blood arrows, you need blood roses with the thin beast bones. But I'll show you how to get an unlimited amount of thin beast bones, because this removes the annoying farming aspect. Like, yes, you'll still have to farm some materials, but it'll be less annoying than killing the hundreds and the hundreds of freaking animals just to make your arrows to be able to fight, right? So what you want to do is fight one of those Bell Bering hunters, and it's specifically the one in the War Master's shack in Limgrave, right here. Now once you fight him, you'll be able to get his bell bearing, and once you bring that back to the Twin Maidens in Roundtable Hold, you'll be able to buy unlimited amount of thin beast bones from them. So what you want to do is make sure that it's nighttime, because they will only invade you at night. And if it doesn't work and you see the merchant is still there, just sit back down at the grace and pass time till nighttime again, and he should spawn. Sometimes it feels like it works like 50% of the time, so it's kind of weird, but I don't know if it just happened to work this way for me, but just keep that in mind. Now to get the different types of arrows like these, you need to find cookbooks which are sold by merchants. Now what you want to do usually is seek out which cookbook that you need for the arrows that you want to use. Specifically, then once you buy them, you'll be able to craft them right away. So I said we'll be using incantations in this build, and these are the two. We'll be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. Now both of those buff your physical damage and attack power, as well as Golden Vow increasing your defense. Now let's look at the talismans we'll be using for this build. So first I got Arrow's Sting Talisman, which raises the attack power specifically of arrows and bolts. So if you're using a crossbow, this will also be applied to you. Now after, we'll be using the Arrow's Reach Talisman, which increases bows' effective range, because arrows in this game will drop the further they go, and eventually they'll either miss their target or not do much damage. But this will increase the bow's range. The Ritual Sword Talisman raises your attack power when your HP is maximum, so this is really good when you're getting into a fight. You already have both of your buffs from the Incantations, and you'll be able to do a ton of damage to bosses. And then finally we have Millicent's Prosthesis, which is one of the better dexterity talismans. It boosts dexterity but also raises attack power with successive attacks. So the Arrow's Reach Talisman is pretty close from here. It's in Limgrave. It's really close to this Everjail, so pick this side of Grace right here. And the talisman will be in this chest right here. Now for the Arrow's Sting Talisman, you can find it in Caelid, and I'll show you where. You want to take the Impassable Great Bridge side of Grace. And all you need to do is make your way up this tower, and the talisman will be in a chest. Now there's like 3 or 4 enemies here, and there's 2 waiting for you right up this ladder, so it's a bit annoying, but you can take them out. And the talisman will be in this chest right here. For the Ritual Sword Talisman, you'll actually find this in the Lux Runes, which is located in the Altus Plateau. And it's literally right next to the Earth Tree grazing Hillside of Grace. Now once you've killed her, come back here and the talisman will be in a chest. For the last talisman, Millicent's Prosthesis, there's two ways you can get this. Now you can get this if you do Millicent's questline till the very end, right up to the Halictree area, where you have to choose if you want to help her defeat her sisters or help her sisters kill her. Now if you choose to help her, you want to get this talisman and get something else, so you have to choose to kill her to get this. But you can get this earlier actually. So after you've given Millicent her Valkyrie Prosthesis arm, you'll meet her right here in Windmill Heights. Right here, and after you defeat the Godskin boss that is here, she'll be standing right here. And what you have to do is fight her and defeat her, and she will drop that talisman. So that's the earliest way you can get it. So these are my stats for this build, and as I said, it is dexterity and faith. We don't need much else, but you need a lot of endurance because the barrage, Ash of War, on the black bow uses a lot of endurance. And because we'll be doing a lot of jumping and shooting and rolling and shooting, like we'll just need a lot of endurance. So I'm using 50 vigor, 15 mind, 40 endurance, 77 dexterity, and 25 faith. Now the faith is for the incantations, and the golden vow requires 25 faith, so that's what I'm using. So obviously dexterity is for the bows, and also like if you want to use throwing knives and the kukri blades and stuff like that, dexterity will help a lot because it'll do a ton of damage. You can also get like bleed proc from the kukris, so that's gonna be really good, or something really good to add to your arsenal. Now if you're having trouble with only using a bow, I know Clint specifically uses a katana, and he also used a staff at one point, like his bow would transform to a staff or whatever. That was kind of weird, but Kate Bishop also uses a katana in one of the games. So if you want to use a melee weapon, I would suggest using the Uchi katana, because hey, it's lore accurate, so there's that. Now for the incantations, I'll show you where to get both of them. So for Flame Grant Me Strength, you'll have to go back to Caelid again. It's near Fort Gale, so you want to take the Fort Gale north side of Grace. Now the spell will be right between these two guys on this body right here, and you want to grab it and go, because they will kill you. Now, and last but not least, Golden Vow, you need to come to Mount Gilmere. Again, take this Bridge of Iniquity side of Grace, and we want to go to this shack right here. Now, I think we'll get invaded. This is your first time there, but you'll be able to loot that incantation in there. This is where you can find the Golden Vow. So that's everything. This is a really fun theme build because I've been a bit obsessed with Hawkeye these days, and I thought it was about time for me to actually try a bow build because I haven't yet, you know, in my 250 hours of playing. And it was really fun to learn. Honestly, I thought it would be way weaker than it actually is. I think with all the buffs and all the talismans, I think I managed to make something that, you know, can actually do damage. Because let's face it, bows in this game need a little buff. And I was surprised that I could take on that Godskin Apostle, especially on New Game Plus, and it went really well, so I'm really happy with this build. I hope you guys really enjoyed it as well. So have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll see you all very soon.